Welcome to the Healthcare Technology Report, a leading information source on healthcare technology companies and solutions. In this episode, we speak with Chris Lowe, CEO of Nusano, a medical technology company addressing critical shortages in the global radioisotope market. Nusano's proprietary ion source technology enables the efficient and sustainable production of multiple isotopes simultaneously, supporting cancer therapies, diagnostic imaging, and other essential applications. Chris brings more than 20 years of executive experience in healthcare and finance, having raised over $500 million in private and public financing, and having completed more than $1 billion in M&A transactions. Prior to Nusano, he served as CFO and COO of Cortexyme, where he guided the company through its IPO and eventual acquisition. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked the episode, click to follow. Chris, thank you for taking the time. Great to be with you.
Great to be here, RJ. Appreciate it.
So I think the thing that's interesting here is that you have a technology, more specifically radioisotopes here, where there's the topic area that relates to the healthcare technology industry, the healthcare industry at large. But it also relates to other industries. For the benefit of our audience, because this is going to be a new one for them, tell us a little bit about the foundation to the technology and how Nusano came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the origin of the company really is involved with Dr. Glenn Rosenthal really accepting a challenge from his mentor about 13 years ago, where the challenge was, if you were going to create and enable next generation research, in the field of isotopes and isotope production, here's how you might think about doing it. And that challenge was what led to Glenn designing an ion source that was very disruptive in its thinking. That really created kind of the first 5, 6, 7 years was really around almost any other tech development or Silicon Valley-ish type startup of trial and error and refining, what this ion source would look like. That ion source today, now has over 24,000 hours of experience at a 99% uptime. So he's literally brought it from nothing, from conceptual drawing on a cocktail napkin on an airplane to this really reliable foundation of a linear accelerator-based production platform. But again, because our ion source is so significantly different, it really opens up a lot of doors in the world of isotope production for us.
And many in the audience may not be as technical, including myself, but how do you apply the ion source to, in effect, be relevant to healthcare?
No, it's a great question. And so fundamentally, when you think about isotope production, it is simply a combination of energy hitting a target, and the ensuing chemical reaction is what creates the isotopes. So your juice, if you will, has to come from either the level of energy that you're producing or a target material that is, in this case, radioactive to some degree. It has energy embedded in it. So for us, because we have such a high level of energy that we produce, that gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility on the target material and therefore the types of isotopes that we can produce. When you think about our production platform, really our ion source, once you get beyond the ion source into the linear accelerator, how we bend the beam, how we split it, it's pretty cool stuff, but in the world of physics, it's kind of right down the middle of the fairway. Our secret sauce truly is the ion source and how we're able to generate the volume of energy that we produce. And that's most evidenced by most folks when they think of a linear accelerator, we think of, if you're familiar with, Stanford's linear accelerator out in California, I think it's, close to a mile long. We read about things like in Switzerland, that are a mile long. Our linear accelerator is about 70 feet long. And the reason it can be so short is because we have such a large amount of energy coming out of that ion source. And the key differentiator there is that energy is created in a micro pulsating fashion. So it's literally, if you're old enough to go back to Star Trek like I am, or if you want to stick to the Star Wars generation, that energy hits the target and it just envelops it, literally like butter melting on warm toast. That allows us to have a richer chemical reaction, meaning a richer level of isotope production.
Hmm. Now let's talk about the various industries. I think there's like four major verticals that you're targeting or focused on. Tell us about that, the interplay between your technology and those industries.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like to remind the team the isotopes don't care what they're used for. They want to have an existence and that's it. Now, first and foremost, the company was founded around applications in life sciences. Isotopes are the ingredient number one for, a next generation, but a current generation of oncology therapeutics. And and Novartis is the leader in that field with a drug called Pluvicto that has amazing success. And they've really kind of laid out a roadmap for other drug developers of here's how you use an isotope effectively against these classes of tumors.
Mm.
So we're producing and will produce, quite a few different flavors of isotopes because we believe, a lot of the research that we see where, the different isotopes may have different impacts on different tumor types. You and I may react differently to different, types of therapeutics. So we have a really good opportunity there in the life sciences space. There's also examples in the aerospace and defense space. Isotopes are used in a couple of different broad manners. One, isotopes are good conductors of energy. And so they're used in avionics and weapons guidance systems. And then they're basically in the core to be able to facilitate the many calculations that technology needs in order to fulfill its objective of going to the moon or, flying around the world, whatever the case is. They are also used as heat sources in the field of satellites. So, going back, I think all the way to the 60s, maybe the 70s, we and other countries around the world use things like plutonium, for satellite launches to the moon. Well, that's probably not good in the long haul to be launching plutonium up into space. This seems like something that might come back to bite you at some point. So we're fortunate that now these developers are diversifying into other types of isotopes and materials that would serve as heat sources to allow them to go to the dark side of the moon, deep space as well. And then we get into the field of energy, and isotopes actually play a very key role in the foundation of nuclear fuel.
Mm.
And that's something that we're very well versed in the ability to produce those isotopes of interest and how we can do that very efficiently and abundantly to help nuclear fuel requirements scale up in this country as our energy demand continues to rise.
Hmm. Heading back into life sciences, in terms of where you are in the commercialization of your technology, are these kind of, contractual relationships you have with pharma companies?
They are there, it's pharma in general, and there's both therapeutic and diagnostic applications for us as well. And yes, they're contractual relationships within the industry. They vary tremendously. If you're dealing with an isotope that's a little bit more on the scarce side, then both parties are probably motivated to have a little bit more teeth in the agreement, if you will, because both parties want certainty, right? If it's, an isotope that is a little bit more broadly based, then it's probably more of a typical supply agreement where, yes, it is a long-term supply agreement, but you're refining the volumes and the delivery dates on a quarterly basis, that sort of thing.
Hmm. And is it something that, if you took a look at the life sciences landscape and all the companies that play in it in the ecosystem, that a good fraction of them would be viable clients for you? And then I'm curious about like kind of what's your penetration into that market currently?
Most of the large pharma all have programs in this area of radiotherapeutics at this point, radioligand therapeutics. So let's call that kind of the top 8 or 10 in the world, pharma companies. But then, there's another 70 to 80 companies that are the small and mid-sized, and they range from the Series A venture-backed biotech to, kind of the small and mid-cap type of biotech where this is part of their pipeline. It's a very diverse set of customers within life sciences, and they're at all different stages of development. They're at all different stages of success. And, for us, we've been ramping up, and we've just started production of certain isotopes back in March or April of this year, producing stable isotopes. And now we're at the point here coming up within the next 90 days or so, we'll start delivering our first customer samples. So in this vertical, customer samples are a critical first stage, right? So that the customer can conduct their own stability testing and whatnot. And then once they get comfortable that our purity and our quality is, as good or better than what they've been dealing with, then they integrate us into their delivery schedules.
You've raised a good amount of capital. Looks like over 100 million from Wasatch Group. And they're an interesting group, obviously very reputable, well known. Tell us about that partnership. How did that come about?
Wasatch is a very diversified private equity organization, is the way I think of it. They have an arm which is focused on real estate development. And when we were first looking to build out our facility, our main production facility, we were located in Southern California. And so we first looked at Southern California, and unfortunately, PG&E made it very obvious that they would not be able to support us very quickly. And so we quickly expanded the search to Utah, Arizona, Texas. And that was how we met Wasatch. And their responsiveness on the real estate development side for building what is a one-of-a-kind facility on the planet really was the kickoff to the relationship. And then it was shortly thereafter, as we were raising Series B at the time, that they expressed an interest in having us speak to their venture side or their private equity side of the house. And now, gosh, just in the last couple of years, they've more than tripled their ownership and have truly just been good partners to us, not just from the real estate side, not just from the check writing side, but candidly, just from the problem solving side. As you go through and you're scaling up a company, they've been really good.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find your way to connect with the company? It seems like you do have a background that's relevant and you've done very interesting things in your career. So maybe tell us about yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that. I've been really lucky, RJ, to be around a lot of groups of talented people and been fortunate that, that those teams of, we've been able to take some companies public. We've been able to take some therapeutics all the way to FDA approval, and as I was taught a long time ago, what's good for the patient is good for business. And so with that background, Google Ventures is a common investor for this current company, for Nusano, and my prior company. And, after we had merged the prior company, that was kind of the introduction was, gee, we have something in our portfolio that we're starting a search for a CEO. We think you'd be, a good fit. And that was kind of how it began. I hadn't spent a lot of time directly involved with isotopes at that point. I had to do a lot of research, had to speak to a lot of people in my network of give me the Isotope 101 crash course. But what I quickly appreciated about Nusano was that this was technology that even back then was really pretty fully validated. And so, this was not I need to wait for a clinical trial readout and see how things are going. This was a unique opportunity to scale the technology and to enable others to solve their customers' problems. That was a huge attraction for me, to be able to be a part of this.
And when you came on board, was the executive team already pretty much there, or did you have to kind of recruit folks?
We pretty much had to recruit folks. The two co-founders were certainly there, but really everybody else on the team was coming in at the same time, or they were recruited kind of in the ensuing year or two after.
What does the 3 to 5 year plan look like? Is this a situation where your kind of technology is fully validated, the path to commercialization is there, and you have an eye towards larger capital raises, either private or public? How do you foresee it playing out?
I think, and this is one of the synergies that I feel with Wasatch, is we're very much aligned on this concept, but I really feel like there's 4 or 5 companies embedded within Nusano today that at some point will be unlocked and, sent out of the nest to stand on their own.
Mm.
The vision as we sit here today, I think something like, our efforts in energy and even critical minerals, at some point as we scale up that ability, it will spin out. And to your point, whether that's public or private equity, that's kind of an easier decision to make at the time for sure. But for us, we think we've got a group of foundational technologies that will continue to spin out ideas or breakthroughs in the world of physics. And, as I tell folks routinely, we certainly don't change the laws of physics, but we do execute them at a level of efficiency that many people didn't think was possible. And I think as we continue to do that, it will create more and more opportunities in different industries, and those will be the things that stand alone.
Mm-hmm. One of the areas we like to touch on is the value that investors provide to the company, aside from simply the financial capital. You mentioned Google Ventures. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of how you interact with your investors?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been fortunate that I've had a lot of investor relationships in my life. I can tell you this is the most collaborative that I've ever experienced in my life. And that was something that when I first sat down with Wasatch over 3 years ago, that was a message from them of, we want to be able to have you share not just successes, but frankly, problems freely. Tell us, hey, this is something that's on the horizon. So it's been that type of relationship with all my investors, with Section 32, with the Google folks at different times. And it may be something as simple as, gee, we're putting together a clinical advisory board to help inform the types of isotopes that we're producing for that life science vertical. Or it may be things that are more complex. I mean, I now have one of my strategic advisors is one of the former secretaries of the VA. And that certainly wasn't a relationship that I had, or that, that came through one of the investors as well. So it's that type of value add of really enabling the strategic, progress of the company that really is extremely productive. And then what I appreciate is don't get me wrong, they are very strategic. They also hold my feet to the fire on, milestone execution. And that's something that we talk about internally, is that time is our only enemy. The longer it takes for us to get to market, the more patients and customers that are left waiting, if you will.
Okay, we're coming up on the tail end of the conversation here. I've got two final questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
I mean, so there's a couple of folks, but I mean, really the one going all the way back to when I worked for Philips early in my career. He was basically a division general manager. His name was Don Sifoni. And Don taught me how to truly listen actively. I was a young analyst supporting him, and I got the privilege of sitting in on his staff meetings. And I'll just say that I remember so many times where maybe somebody that worked for him was offering what was clearly, even I knew, was an incomplete idea, or maybe a challenging situation. And Don had just such amazing patience, even though you could tell he knew the answer, he knew the direction we were going, but he was always respectful to listen and make sure he heard everything from the party speaking. That's one of the cores for myself. I've always tried very hard. Can't claim to be perfect, but I've always tried very hard to make sure that even in the most challenging moment, you make sure that you're truly listening and trying to understand what that other person that you're speaking to, what they're trying to communicate, and why they have the perspective that they do.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
I'm going to have to give you a two-part answer. Look, the low-hanging fruit there, and the one that is core to our mission, is the American Cancer Society. They're not just an investor in the company, they're also a partner. But really more relevantly is, we've engaged at a local level. We volunteer at local hospitals, our employees do. We've had cancer survivors come in and speak. And it just makes our mission, when you have such a high-performing group of scientists like we do, it's sometimes easy to get detached from what the impact is that you're truly making. So that's hugely critical to us, and we try to keep it in the forefront. The other one that I'll say that's become a mission for us over the last few years is working with Ukrainian refugees. there's obviously a very personal aspect to helping out your neighbor. And that's a shared mission that we have with the team at Wasatch as well.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you again for taking the time. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks so much, RJ. I enjoyed it.